Sorry about that. So here we are with Led Zeppelin 2. And here on the turntable is the Super Van. It's a Real Riders. And if you look on the back, it says the Brown Bomber, which was this album's nickname. Not because people thought it crapped out. It just took pretty much the nation by storm. This is the album that was recorded in under 32 hours while they were touring with their Led Zeppelin 1 album. And considering Led Zeppelin 1 had, I believe, 8 songs on it, that's not very much material for a heavy band to do a concert with. So what they were doing, much like the Grateful Dead and the Allman Brothers, Leonard Skinner, bands of that nature, they would go into long jam sessions and throw in cover tunes just to build up the time that they're on the stage, because they really wanted to perform for the audience and give them what they wanted. They were very dedicated. And here is, you can hear in the background, train kept it rolling all night long. In the early years of Led Zeppelin, they were big on playing that number, because that was the number they started off with when they first got together in Jimmy Page's rented studio. So now here we are with Led Zeppelin 2, and again, this has 8 songs on it, and Robert Plant is now developing more of a lyrical sense to his repertoire, and he's now throwing in reference to the books from J.R.R. Tolkien, The Hobbit. There is plenty of reference throughout Led Zeppelin that don't need Walt Disney on while we're doing Led Zeppelin. So it kind of threw me off track on what I was saying. So anyway, Robert Plant is incorporating tidbits of J.R.R. Tolkien's books, and taking bits and pieces and throwing them into his songs, their songs, excuse me, and it worked out really well. Ramble On has a reference to The Hobbit, as he mentions Gollum and the evil one crept up and slipped away with her. That was a reference to The Hobbit and Gollum. If anybody knows The Hobbit, they know who Gollum is. That creepy little dude that had the ring that made him invisible. Robert Plant was very much into literature, and that helped develop his lyrical skills, and he didn't hold back when he wrote, and for the most part, it's safe to say that Led Zeppelin was a quintessential band that could have been the poster band for drugs, sex, and rock and roll. It's that simple. When they went out and came back to the States on tour for Led Zeppelin 2, they had already developed an underground reputation as being a hard-hitting band, and people on the streets were talking about them, and they couldn't get enough of the albums. They were selling out like crazy, and they wanted to see Led Zeppelin. They wanted to see what this was all about. The critics, on the other hand, were just not kind to Led Zeppelin, and they refused to do interviews, and it actually worked out into their favor because it created the mystery of Led Zeppelin as to what goes on behind closed doors. You hear stories, but are they true? Are they just bolstered stories to inflame an ego of a band that doesn't need an ego inflamed because they are pretty much at the top of the list? Who knows? But there's been plenty of stories written about Led Zeppelin, and they love to perform out in California, and their choice of stay out there was the Hyatt House, which was commonly known as the Riot House when Led Zeppelin showed up. John Bonham had taken a Harley that he rented, and he literally drove it through the hallways of the hotel. One time they were there. The thing is, they did crazy shit, caused damage, tore out walls, threw the TVs out the windows, but they always paid for their damages. They never walked away and said, screw it. They loved that place. They always wanted to come back, so they wanted to make sure they were welcome. They paid for their damages, and the owner humbly accepted and was honestly quite thrilled by the fact that Led Zeppelin wanted to stay there while they were touring along the California coast. And so when they were recording, Jimmy Page was bouncing back and forth between doing the tours and concert dates, and on his time off, when he was recording Led Zeppelin 2, he was flying back to New York to basically master the recordings of the album. And when Led Zeppelin 2 came out, it hit the masses like a thunderstorm. This album here is what put rock and roll on notice. This was the new way that the music was going to be coming out, and they were part of the British movement. And I can honestly say that if it wasn't for the British movement, we wouldn't have the kick-ass rock music that we have. I'm not putting the Allman Brothers down, or Leonard Skinner, or any of our other homegrown bands by any stretch of the imagination, but the British invasion just overpowered everything, and they hit hard and heavy. And around the same time, Black Sabbath was just starting to get noticed as well. So between them and Led Zeppelin, people were hearing new heavy music coming out of the underground, and they were loving it, and they wanted more of it. It has been said that on one of the concerts during the promotion of the Led Zeppelin 2 album, the kids in the front row on the stage, Jimmy had remarked that he couldn't believe what he was seeing. The kids were actually banging their heads on the stage to the music. And who knows, maybe that's where headbangers came from. But Jimmy Page has been quoted in making a comment about how astonished he was that people were actually loving the music and abusing their heads at the same time. And it became a commonplace, which led to the thrash pits of now. But Led Zeppelin 2 it came on hard, heavy, struck a note with everybody except for the critics, who politely said that it was another album that is overproduced and would not last more than a couple months, and the band would eventually fade away. Remarks like that caused Led Zeppelin to turn their backs on interviews. So it was the media that killed it for themselves, on interviewing Led Zeppelin. And if there were any interviews done, more often than not, they would get cut short because they would get irritated by the nonsensical questions that were being asked. Instead of asking about the music that they were putting out, they would start asking questions about Jimmy Page's mysticism with the occult and I can't remember the guy's name that he bought the castle from over in Scotland. It'll come to me. So they belted out these songs, polished them. Jimmy put them on the album. Master recorded it on the vinyl, and a whole lot of Zepp. Or a whole lot of Zepp. That's me, dude. Whole lot of love, rather. That's where a whole lot of Zepp came from. As if any of you didn't know, that's where I took a whole lot of Zepp from. A whole lot of love was a big request. That one and Heartbreaker. They were actually, there was not one song on the first two albums that did not make the top charts, at least in the top 20 to top 10. That is pretty damn good for 16 songs and 2 albums on a band that just started to get their feet wet. So at one point they were approached by the record company and saying that, why don't you scale down your Whole Lot of Love so we can put it on a 45 and everybody can purchase it and get airplay. And Jimmy said, that's not the way we work. As a matter of fact, there is only one early original example of a Led Zeppelin 45 that was released, and it was part of PJ Proby's project, and it never got on the album, but there was other stuff that Led Zeppelin did with that project. However, the song Hey Hey What Can I Do was on the flip side of the Immigrant Song, and that is the only example in the early days that you will see of a 45 that Led Zeppelin put out. He refused to have his songs cut short just so they could be put on a 45 and listened to on the radio. He refused it. He said if people want to listen to it, they'll buy the album, or the radio stations are going to start playing the songs off the album. And he dictated what went on, and he got what he wanted. He didn't pull any punches. He played it straight, and he had Peter Grant, who was just an enormous presence and personality in general. So having him behind Jimmy Page was like having a truck full of Rottweilers. So Led Zeppelin, they they dictated what they wanted and how they wanted things done, and they weren't going to allow any record contract or record company or anybody in the media tell them what they need to do or how they're supposed to run their music. They were asked to start playing songs like Somebody from the Box Tops, just to get short numbers in, just so the record company could throw 45s out and make money off of it. And they signed this contract before they even saw Led Zeppelin, from Led Zeppelin 1. They just heard that this band was so phenomenal that they just had to sign them based off of what they heard. There was some regrets after they signed without knowing who they were or hearing anything about them, but in the long run, I can assure you that Atlantic Records was quite happy with Led Zeppelin carrying their label. And they did so all the way up until 1975, when Jimmy Page created their own label. And it had mild success. It worked for Led Zeppelin because they were able to make their own music off of their own record label, which was why after Physical Graffiti you start seeing signs that show the original painting, which was called Evening Fall of Day. The Swan Song was altered a little bit because the right hand on the original painting was behind the guy's head, and Led Zeppelin put both the hands reaching up towards the sky so they could use the picture without having any infringement issues. So, a famous band who had signed on with the Swan Song label would be Bad Company. And that would be their first album, Desolation Angels. That was their first Swan Song label. And that coincidentally was Led Zeppelin's first band outside of their own band to sign with them. And unfortunately, Bad Company didn't last too long. I can't remember what happened there, but anyway, Led Zeppelin just continued to reach new heights, and every time they performed, they set the bar higher, and they never lowered the bar. True, Jimmy Page at times played extremely sloppy, but you have to realize the guy was also addicted to heroin, and that didn't start happening until after the Physical Graffiti album. I think it was Richard Cole who introduced Jimmy Page to heroin, and it altered their music and their concerts. As a matter of fact, Jimmy Page had to be taken off stage because he passed out. He was so fucked up. John Bonham, he passed out from drinking too much. John Paul Jones was passed out from exhaustion. I mean, these guys were on the go 24/7, and when they weren't recording or playing their concerts, they were partying their asses off. There was never any break, but they always wanted to be home. All they could think about was their families and the New England countrysides and their homes in England. So there's a little bit of Led Zeppelin 2 retrospective. I hope you enjoyed it. I will be following this up with Led Zeppelin 3. Don't know when I'll be doing that, but there will be a Led Zeppelin 3 retrospective. And why not talk about Led Zeppelin with Diecast, especially when I can do it? It's fun. And I get to flex my Led Zeppelin brain muscles. So anyway, there's your Led Zeppelin 2 retrospective. So if you haven't hit that subscribe button, don't be shy. Hit it and join the party. There's a lot going on. Hit share and like also. I think that's about all I got. I might be back on later with another video. But I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope everybody stays safe and healthy, and I will talk to you on my next video. Take care.